I like to, on occasion, to look at various characters in the Bible and study them as the Bible depicts them. One of my favorite characters in the Bible is the man Caleb. And you know, most men and women in the Bible, if there's a lengthy discussion of any sort in there, there's some flaw in that person pointed out. Not all the time, but most of the time there's some mistake they made in judgment at least, or whatever. But Caleb, I can't find anything mentioned about him that's bad. Caleb was one of the 12 spies that went into the land of Canaan to spy it out. Now, let me point out what happened. God told him to send the spies in, but these spies were princes among their tribes. Each tribe had one of their princes to go, and it was one of the chief prince. So this is the leading man of that tribe. So Caleb was a leading prince of the tribe of Judah, we'll see later. We're going to look at some information about Caleb, and then we'll look at some other things about him. In Numbers 13:6, each of the tribes sent one of their prince and their chief prince in the land. Caleb was one of the 12 spies that was sent in, and of the tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh. Now, what here, Caleb is from the tribe of Judah. Each tribe had their own man. Now, we're going to see this, and it's hard for me to say for certain about this, but it appears that each man was sent to the region where his tribe was going to be settled, and he went to that. That's what it appears. We can't say that for certain, but it appears that that's the case. We know that's the case with Caleb, and it appears that the other ones were sent to the spots where they were supposed to, their tribe was going to have the land. So they went into the land, each of them. Caleb, along with Joshua, when the 12 spies came back, they all gave an equal report as far as the land, its fruitfulness, its productivity, and even of the people in the cities. And there were 2 of them that interpreted the data correctly, but 10 did not. So what happened was, in Numbers 13:30, when the 10 spies interpreted this to say, we can't take the land. The land is too much for us. These men, they're giants in the land, and we had a lesson on the giants a month or 2 ago. And some of these men were about 10 foot tall. There is archaeological and geological evidence that these men existed. We documented that as well. So there's archaeological evidence of their existence. So you can see if I'm going to face a man with a sword, or I got some weapon, and that sucker is 10 foot tall, I could be afraid of him pretty easily. Okay? That could be the case. I could be afraid of him very easily. However, if God was with me and I trusted he was with me, I would not be afraid of him. If I knew God was going to be with me and God had promised to be with me. So the people then got stirred up over it, and they got all excited. And we won't read their response, but Caleb stilled the people before Moses. They become all upset and want to go back to Egypt. And Caleb stilled the people, so the people are all stirred up. Why? All 12 of the spies gave the same report as to the people, the productivity of the land, and the cities, but the 10 spies interpreted, we can't do it. 2 of the spies interpreted, we can. And so right here, I remember when I was in high school, one of my teachers had a sign up on his in front of the on top of the blackboard. American ends in I can. He was in the Battle of the Coral Sea and was wounded there and nearly died from it. but American ends in I can. And we need to think as Christians, it ends in I can. I can. With the help of God, we can do it. Caleb and Joshua had that idea. So Caleb stood up. He stood up first and stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." We can overcome this because God's been with us. They had seen all of the miracles God had worked prior to this, and they should have trusted God, but they didn't. But he stilled the people. He's the first one to stand up. He stood up before Joshua stood up. He stood up and stilled the crowd. And this man stood when everybody's upset. The spies had told that the land was everything that God had promised. Now we're going to go back and read what they said. And they told him and said, "We came unto the land whither thou sentest us," the spies, "and surely it flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it." They brought back, they had a cluster of grapes that it took 2 men to carry the cluster of grapes. You say, how can that be? That land over there is not that productive now. The soil is rich, doesn't get rain much anymore. It's changed. The climate has changed since that time. But that's another question. So right here, you see the fruit. You see what we brought back. And this passage tells what all they brought back. The spies had told of the people of the land, yes, the land is productive and it produces everything we want, milk and honey. But here's the problem. Howbeit, listen to that. Howbeit, but, the people that dwell in the land are strong. Well, that's no problem if God's with you. And the cities are fortified. That's to be expected. God's with you. All right. And very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Now, we've had a lesson on them, and these were giants. They lived in that land, and we have archaeological evidence they were in other parts of the world at that time. Men that were around 10 foot tall. And that's Goliath was a descendant of them. So right here we see these men that are 10 foot tall, the Anakims, Anak. All right. So, and Amalek dwelleth in the land of the south, and the Hittite, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and they were afraid of them. Dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanite dwelleth by the sea and along the side of the Jordan. It's filled with people. We can't take it. And again, they viewed themselves as grasshoppers. We won't look at that further. The people were obviously disturbed by the report because Caleb had to still them back in verse 30. Caleb stilled the people now. They all get upset over it. You brought us here. We can't take this land. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses. Let us go up at once and possess it, for we're well able to overcome it. Because God's with us. Now, the Barnes Church may not be a very big congregation, but if we're with God, we can do great things. We need to be doing them. But look further, if you will. Caleb took the lead in standing for obedience to God even before Joshua. He took the lead. Some people don't realize this, but that's what it shows here in the text. It's possible Caleb did not know that Joshua stood with him. He may have been like the 3 children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whose real names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the book of Daniel. They were told to worship that golden idol that had been built, and they said, we won't. He said, I'm going to kill you if you don't. And they said, God is able to save us. We don't know whether he will or not, but we're not going to worship your idol. In other words, they were willing to die. Caleb, there's no evidence that Joshua had told him anything. We don't know whether he had or hadn't. But I think he was prepared to stand alone for obedience to God. I think that's very telling of this man. Have you ever been in a situation where everybody seemed to be against you? I know we have it when we're out in the world. We see, I stand alone, and there's people that are wanting and saying this or that or the other. And so we sometimes have to speak up. But Caleb stood up. He stood up when it was important to be counted. So he obeyed God. Caleb was the first to stand for truth. He was bold. Caleb stood against the majority, the 10 spies. Can you go against the majority? Are you willing to go against the majority? Remember, the majority is going to be lost. It's going to be a small number, straight and few there be that enter in thereat, the gate that enters into life. But it's hard to go against the crowd. It's a hard thing. Caleb knew that they were not able to overcome giants and walled cities by their own human power. I know, it's evident Caleb was a smart man. He knew that. But he knew God was with him, and he had already seen the mighty wonders that God had worked. He had seen evidence that God was able to cause him to win the battles. Caleb had gone through the Red Sea. Caleb trusted that if God were with them, they would not fail. In Numbers 14, verses 6 through 9. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were of them that spied out the land, rent their clothes. So now right here, these two men, and I don't understand the Jews rent their clothes whenever they're in grief. But they do it. And to me, it's silly, but they do it. Your wife has to sew your clothes back up. It's kind of crazy. I think they rip their pockets off now. That's what they do, rip part of the pocket off. The wife has to sew it back up. But that's a sign of grief. And so they did this, and they rent their clothes whenever the people turned and want to disobey God. And they spake unto all the congregation of children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to spy it out is exceeding good land. You agree with that? And they agreed to that. If Jehovah delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it unto us, a land that flows with milk and honey. If God is with us, we'll win. Both these men now understood it. Joshua and Caleb both. They both stood up. So we find here, now these two men together now stand up. There's two good spies now. The other 10 were unfaithful. Verse 9 continues, only rebel not against the Lord, against Jehovah. Neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is removed from over them, and Jehovah is with us. Fear them not. God is with us. Don't be afraid of them. And that's a lesson we need to be aware of. If God is with us, if we're doing what God says, then God is with us. And we can win as God's people. So they tell them, they're trying to get the people to see, don't you rebel against God, trust God. The message that Joshua and Caleb give is the right message. Trust God. Do what God says. Even when the people wanted to stone him for his report, Caleb stood his ground. He continued to trust God. Now then, this is where, as the saying goes, the rubber meets the road. They're about to stone him. They're about to stone Joshua and Caleb. God intervenes for them. But we see in verse 10, and all the congregation bade stone them with stones. Now, that's not a very pretty way to die, to be stoned to death. And the glory of Jehovah appeared in the tent of meeting unto all the children of Israel. God showed his glory. Don't you do that. Don't you even think about doing that. That's the message. God intervened. I don't know that Joshua and Caleb knew God was going to intervene. I see those two men as standing in the threat of being stoned, with the possibility of that happening. But they were willing to stand with God, even though there's a possibility they might have been stoned. I look at them as we see in the book of Daniel, in the plain of Dura, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood. They didn't know whether God would save them or not. Joshua and Caleb may have been just like them, probably were. But these are men who had great faith, and they stood and they trusted God. We need to trust God. Caleb is mentioned first. In the listing of him and Joshua and Caleb, Caleb is mentioned first most of the time. Now, what we find here in the Hebrew and Greek languages, as well as in English, you list by priority. The most prominent is first, and the second is second most prominent, and so forth. For instance, if we had some kind of a meal and we invited Governor Stitt to it, we'd probably list him as the first because of him being governor, just the prominence. And that's exactly how it works. And so Caleb is mentioned before Joshua several times. There's one time he's mentioned after him. In Numbers 14:30, surely you shall come into the land concerning which I swear that would make you to dwell therein, save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Caleb's mentioned first. Caleb, the one that stood up first, he's mentioned first. At this point, he's more prominent. Later, God chooses Joshua to lead the people in, and Joshua becomes more prominent. I don't see a bit of jealousy on the part of Caleb. He's willing to do what God wants him to do. I don't see any jealousy over it. And so that's no problem. All right? In verse 65, Numbers 26:65, for Jehovah said unto them, they shall surely die in the wilderness, and there is not left a man of them. Now, who's he talking about? He's talking about the 10 spies that were unfaithful in the context. And he says, there's not left of them, surely will die in the wilderness, and not left a man of them, save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Caleb's mentioned first again. He's the one that stood up first. He's mentioned first. We usually, when we talk about Joshua and Caleb. All right? Look here again. Save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, because they have wholly followed the Lord. So they've wholly followed the Lord. Both men have wholly followed the Lord. They followed the Lord completely, trusting him totally. That's something great to say about both these men, but we're talking about Caleb right now. But he's mentioned first, over and over. He's more prominent at this point. In many languages, including Hebrew and Greek, the most prominent is mentioned first. That's a priority. Joshua is mentioned first in 2 instances, and we won't be looking at those. But both of these are later in time. And we see the instance where they tore their garments. Joshua was mentioned first, but he probably is the one who took the lead in that matter, which I think is kind of silly, tearing your garments, rending your clothing. But let's look at Caleb's character. But that's what they did, and they'd sometimes put ashes on themselves to indicate they're in mourning, or put sackcloth on or something like that. Let's look at Caleb's character. He was so much that's good to be said about him. He had a different disposition, spirit, lowercase spirit, than the 10 spies. In Numbers 14:24, but my servant Caleb, because he hath another spirit with him, and hath followed me wholly, or fully. Now we're going to see there are 2 words that are applied to how he followed God. Fully in this passage, and wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y, completely, see, in about 3 other verses. So he has another disposition, another attitude. Our heart, our spirit, is where we make decisions. The heart of Caleb was good. He didn't have the spirit or disposition of the 10 spies. He had the good spirit. He trusted God. He had that right attitude. It's his attitude. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him will I bring into the land wherein he went, and his seed shall possess it. So he says, Caleb is going to go into the land. These 10 spies won't. The next verse tells you Joshua is going to go in too. Okay? So we're not leaving out Joshua, but we're just not preaching about Joshua this morning. But look further. Caleb gave word from his heart. And so the heart in the Bible is not the blood pump, it's the mind. And so his mind, his heart, from the heart, evil speech comes or good speech comes. Evil actions come or good actions come. Good and evil come from the heart. If the heart is good, goodness flows out of it. Good speech and good actions. The heart's not good, evil comes out of it. So Caleb gave word from his heart. 40 years old, Caleb speaking now, was I when Moses, the servant of Jehovah, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as was in my heart. The word I gave was the same message these bad spies gave, but my heart said we can win. God is with us. If God is with us, we can win. We will win. So you see, his heart was saying, I trust God. That's the heart of Caleb. He trusted God. That's what faith's all about. There's trust and hope in it. Hope, expectation, reason to expect because of my faith. What I know based upon evidence, that's what faith is. His heart was good. He had a good heart. Caleb followed God wholly in these, we've already seen the passage fully, but we're going to see the word holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, in several passages here. Now, that's very interesting. Sometimes, we do what God says 98% of the time, but the other 2%, I don't want to do it. Not Caleb. He followed God wholly. Save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, because they have wholly followed the Lord, or Jehovah. Both Joshua and Caleb, or as we should say, Caleb and Joshua, because of the order they're mentioned here, wholly followed the Lord, Jehovah. Both men were this way. But again, we're looking at Caleb. Wholly followed the Lord, or Jehovah. In Deuteronomy 1:36, save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He has seen it. He shall see it. He shall see the land. Why? These 10 spies won't see the land. He will. And to him will I give the land that he hath trodden upon. So I'm going to give him not only he's going to see the land, but the land he spied out, he's going to get that land. And that's going to be his reward. So he's going to get his land will be, he'll get that land. And to his children, because he hath wholly followed the Lord, Jehovah. So not only was he wholly following God, but the land he spied out, he's going to get it. He's going to get that land. His descendants will get it. He'll own that land. In Joshua 14:14, therefore Hebron is the place that he got, became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, unto this day, because that he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. So he wholly followed Jehovah, or the Lord, God of Israel. Again, he wholly followed him. So he got Hebron. Hebron had another name. We'll see this in a minute. Other information about Caleb. Let's look at some more information about Caleb. Caleb spied out the region around Hebron. That's where he was to get the land. And Joshua 14:12. Now therefore give me this hill country whereof Jehovah spake in that day. Now we've already had the quote of the Lord speaking to him. You're going to get the land where you walked, where you spied out. For thou heardest it that day how the Anakim were there. Now the Anakim were the giants. So here's Joshua and Caleb. And Caleb now is talking to Joshua, said, give me the land, God promised it. And he says, the Anakim are there. These 10-foot tall guys are all around there. That's where they live. I want their land. Well, Joshua's going to say, well, you got to go take it. I can take it. I know I'm 85 years old, but I can take it. We're going to see he was 85 years old. But he He led his men against them. Hey, that's not a spring chicken, 85, okay? But he was 85 years old. We're going to show this in a minute. Let's go back and read this again. I'm amazed at this great man. Now, therefore, give me this hill country whereof Jehovah spake in that day. For thou heardest in that day how the Anakim were there, and cities great and fortified. It may be that Jehovah will be with me, and I shall drive them out as Jehovah spake. I'm going to do what God said. I'm 85, but I'm going to drive them out. I'm going to drive out those 10-foot tall dudes around. We're going to whip them. We're going to beat them because God's with us. This is where the Anakims lived in Joshua 15:13. And unto Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a portion among the children of Judah. Now, this is where the children of Judah took their land, their tribe was. Remember, he's tribe of Judah. According to the commandment of Jehovah to Joshua, even Kiriath Arba. Now, that's the name the giants gave it. Arba, A-R-B-A, was the name of their father, which Arba was the father of Anak, the same as Hebron. So this now, the Jews called it Hebron. So they gave it the name Hebron. It was formerly called Kiriath Arba. Arba was the father of the giants. Caleb asked for and was given the land where the Anakims lived. I want their land. I know I got to go whip them to get it, but I'm going to do it because God's with me. And Moses sware on that day, saying, surely the land wherein thy foot has trodden shall be an inheritance to thee, thy children forever, because thou hast wholly followed Jehovah my God. We've already had this verse before, but I'll bring it back up again. So he went and spied that land out. He spied out, and he came back and said, I know they got great walls. I know they're 10 foot tall, but God is with us. The other men went to other regions where the Anakim weren't. And they may have been tall and fortified cities, but they probably went through and saw some of the giants, but they weren't going to take the land that had the giants in it, but Caleb did. I say this Caleb was a great man. He had great faith in God. He was not afraid. He's one of my favorite men in the Bible. He was 85 years old when he entered Canaan. Remember, he was 40 whenever he went into the land. Now, sometimes preachers will say, oh, it's 40 years the wilderness wandered. It's actually 45. These are rounded numbers. The 40 is a rounded number. And now, behold, Jehovah kept me alive, Joshua 14:10, and he spake these 45 years from the time that Jehovah spake the word unto Moses, which Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, lo, I am this day 85 years old. Score is 20. I'm 85 years old. So I was 40 when I went in to spy out, and now we've wandered for 45 years. And now I'm 85. Hey, we don't have very many people in here in this room that are 85, do we? Phil, you're not 85, are you? No? Okay. I'm not either. Okay. Now. Okay. Sister Capps is beyond 85, but she's the only one in the congregation that's over 85, as far as I know. And we won't ask any of you ladies how old you are. So 85 years old, that's pretty old. But I want you to look at something more in verse 11. It said, as yet, Caleb speaking, I am as strong this day as I was the day that Moses sent me. I'm 85, but I'm as strong as I was when I was 40. From this, I conclude this, that God said, you're going to have to wander, but I'm going to keep your body healthy. I think Joshua and Caleb's body were kept healthy and they're kept strong. God blessed them beyond what he blessed other people. He gave them strong bodies so that they would still be healthy when they're 85. I believe that. I think that's what happened. He kept their clothes from wearing out and their shoes from wearing out. I think he preserved these men. He says, you're going to have to wander, but I'm going to give you a strong body. So Caleb says, as yet I am as strong this day when I'm 85, and the day that Moses sent me when I was 40. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war, to go out and to come in. So God blessed them. I think God blessed them, these two men. I don't think they knew he was going to do it, but I think he did it. That's how I interpret this. And so these two men could lead Israel into the land. He led the soldiers that fought against, Caleb did. At 85, he led them against the Anakim, the giants, in their fortified cities. That's quite a man, don't you think? I do. Caleb was 40 years old when he spied it out. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of Jehovah, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And he brought him word again as it was in my heart. But now I'm 85, I'm 85. And I'm just as strong. God preserved his health so that he was able to lead an army. And we see it here, yet as strong this day as in the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war. He gave me this strength so that I could wage this warfare, even to go out and to come in. At the age of 85, he fought against the Anakims. Now, therefore, give me this hill country whereof Jehovah spake in that day, Joshua 14:12. For thou heardest it that day, how the Anakim were there, and the cities great and fortified. It may be that Jehovah will be with me, and I shall drive them out as Jehovah spake. Now, this term, it may be, is not expressing doubt. It's just a way of saying God's going to be with me. Just a way of saying that here. But look further. We're almost to the end. He trusted God, and he drove out the giants. And unto Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a portion among the children of Judah, according to the command of Jehovah, to Joshua, even Kiriath Arba, which Arba was the father of Anak, the same as Hebron. So he took the land. Now he has it. Caleb drove out thence the three sons of Anak, Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. He drove them out. This is these tribes, these men that are 10 foot tall. And yet you go into battle against them, and they didn't have tanks and artillery like we have. They might have a slingshot like David had. He had to fight one of them. But here there's a whole tribe of them being fought. David fought one man. But Caleb fought a whole tribe of them. I tell you, Caleb's my man. I like him. I like Caleb. I just am greatly impressed. I've always been impressed with Caleb. Caleb and his men fought an army of giants. Let me summarize, and the lesson will be yours. Caleb wholly or fully followed God, the Lord, Jehovah. He followed God with his heart, with the Lord with his heart. His heart was in it. We're to love God with our heart, soul, and mind. God blessed Caleb for his obedience. He got physical blessings, but he also got spiritual blessings as well. God will bless us fully for wholly following God as well. Maybe not physical blessing. We may not be getting rich or other things, but we have the greatest blessing we can have, and that's heaven. But we need to follow God with our heart, our soul, and mind, fully follow him. And I hope that the lesson has been helpful to us. Let's be like Caleb. Let's trust God and wholly follow him. If you're not a child of God, in order to become one, you must obey the gospel. You begin with faith, the kind of faith Caleb had. Faith that comes out of God's word, Romans 10:17, without it, which you cannot be saved, Hebrews 11:6. That faith, like Caleb's faith, will cause you to obey God, Hebrews 5, verses 7 through 9. He is the author of eternal salvation to all them that obey him. You'll obey him by repenting of your sins, as we see in Acts 17:30, commanded to all men are commanded to. By confessing with your mouth, which is really a vow or an oath to make him your Lord, Romans 10:9 and 10. And then by being immersed or baptized for remission of sins. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation, we're going to sing an invitation song at this time. We're going to come as we stand and sing. your subject.